All right, good afternoon, everybody. On behalf of my dad's family, I would like to thank all of you for coming out to celebrate the life of my dad. He created and maintained true friendships with people of all ages around the world. Thank you to those who traveled long distances to be here and to those that are joining us online. I know I'm not the only one my dad was able to make feel special, feel like everything's going to be okay, and that hard times in life will pass, and that we will accomplish anything we put our minds to. We would like to invite family and friends to come up and let us know about your memories of my dad. I encourage you all to continue to tell stories about him, keep his spirit alive today and always. I'll go ahead and start. I don't really know where to start. My dad was my person. I couldn't have asked for a better dad, and I'm forever grateful that my parents saw me in the news and knew that they had to meet me. When I reminisce about times with my dad, I remember being at daycare across the street and waiting impatiently for him to get home. As soon as I saw his van pull into the driveway, I'd be yelling and waving, asking him, "Come pick us up, come pick us up." And now as a mom, I know how precious those few minutes from getting off of work and getting in the house before seeing your kids can be. But he always came over to come get us right away. Playing sports, my dad was always at every game, cheering me and my whole teams on. Working at the street mill on Saturday mornings with him as a young kid. Walking me to my first day of school every year, to job interviews, first day of my jobs throughout the years. Calling him on my way home from work just to catch up. Sometimes he would call and tell me he's on his way to Walmart, and he'd pick me up even if it was just for 15 minutes to go shopping together. And as I mentioned earlier, the shopping for the kids, he loved that just as much as the kids did, and I would too. I'm thankful for his relationship with my husband, David. He loves him as his own son, and they had their own special relationship, going out to eat together, looking for the best food. And watching his relationship with my kids, Aaliyah and Kauai, made me love him even more, which I didn't even know was possible. He was the best dad and even a better Papa Vent. When I told my parents I was pregnant with Aaliyah, he said, "When are we going to Disneyland?" And we didn't go until just this past December. So take the trip, don't wait till the end. But that's it for me. I know others want to share some stories, so I'll end mine here. If you'd like to come up and talk, please come see me, as I'll have a list running so that we can keep it going. And Marky is up first.
Okay, here I go. I guess I'm leading this story time off. We moved in 1988 in next to the Traylor family. And as we look back on it now, it was a blessing, to get to be close to them, and they became like family to Lee and I and our family. So I have 3 stories that I think will tell you about a little bit of our relationship. And I picked one from the early days, like 1990, and then I got one from 2005, and then I got one from about 2009. So the first one is, I used to sit on Sunday mornings, as a lot of us did when we still read papers. I used to sit and read the Sunday paper, and in that Sunday paper, there was an insert, and it said you can grow potatoes and tomatoes on the same plant. And I thought, that sounds kind of neat. I think I'll do that. So I told Traylor, I said, I'm going to buy one of these plants, and I'm going to grow potatoes on the bottom of it and tomatoes on the top of it. And as Vint often did, he went into a new kind of vernacular, and he said, "You ain't going to grow potatoes and tomatoes on the same plant." And I said, "Look, this says I will." And of course, this began a long string of bets And I said, I will bet you that this plant is going to give us potatoes on the bottom and tomatoes on the top. He said, okay. And it might have been 20 bucks or something. So I planted it. We let it grow for about a month or two. And I said, come on over, I'm going to dig up my plant. And he said, okay, this will be good. And so I got a shovel, we digged it up and pulled out of the ground this. There were maybe four potatoes in the roots of this plant. They were about this big around maybe. And he said, that's no potato. I said, it is a potato. And there were tomatoes on top, of course. I mean, we had some. And so I said, let's go and we'll wash it off. And we're going to take a bite of it and see what you think. So we did that. And he paid me my 20 bucks. And that was my potato tomato plant story. Then in 2005, Then in 2005, Vent and I and a good friend of ours, Dane McCoy, decided we were all three too fat. And we decided we're going to have a contest and see who can lose more weight. And about the same time, we decided we would, in order to lose weight, we would go to Weight Watchers. Vent and I would. And the Weight Watchers was located in the Benicia Yacht Club. And we went one time a week. And we would go in, and the first time we went, there were maybe 40 women and Vent and I. And these women, I mean, from the moment I saw these women, they were kind of pissed off at Vent and I. They were like, this is our group. This is for women, and we don't want you around. And Vent and I picked up on it, and we had paid. We were going to go, and we would stand in line and weigh in, and people would clap or not clap, But we kept that up, I don't know, for 6 to 8 weeks. And then we decided we were not wanted there, and we dropped out of Weight Watchers. So that was a fun time we had. Yeah, I'm a dropout. The last one that I wanted to tell, and then I have a list of things that he said to me down through the 35 to 40 years we've known each other, that I didn't understand the first time he said them to me. It was an Alabama saying, I assume. And so I want to read some of those. But the last time we were together was for his birthday celebration in February of 25. And the first morning we were staying with the Traylors at their home. The first morning we came in, or I came downstairs, Vent came down. He sat down in his chair that was at one end of their family room. And his big TV, he loved electronics. His big TV was at the other end, maybe 20 to 30 feet. So the first thing he does is he turns on the TV and cranks it way up. Then he gets his phone, and because the TV is so loud, he cranks his phone up because he wants to listen to some music. So he starts listening to music on his phone. And by now, Ruth, is Ruth here? I don't know if Ruth is here. Ruth is saying, Vent, will you please turn the TV down? And he would say, what? So we got to a point that nobody could hear anything, the TV or the music. And to top it all off, he had a portable shaver, a head shaver. He had lost a lot of hair by that time. And he shaved it every morning with this portable head shaver. So here he is with his phone here, the TV blaring, and he's shaving his head. He said, Marky, he called me Marky, feel that. Is it smooth? I said, yeah, it's smooth. So I thought that was funny. And the sayings that he had that I began to understand, he would go, well, with the potato-tomato plant, he probably said this. He said, get back. You're not going to grow a potato and tomato from the same plant. And he'd say, get out of here. And this was one of my favorite ones, get on the good foot. And I went, what? The first couple of times I said, what does that mean? And then I figured it out. He would see a person, whether man or female, and he'd go, boy, that person has got it all going on. I loved that one. And the last one was probably X-rated, so I probably shouldn't read that one. The thing I'd like to close with is this guy is named Khalil Gibran, and he's from the Middle East, I think, like Lebanon, I think. And this was back in the late 1800s or 1900s. And he said, when you are sorrowful, look again in your heart, and you shall see that in truth you are weeping for that which has been your delight. And that's the way I think of Vint Traylor. He was a great guy, and we'll all miss him. Thanks.
Okay, next I'd like to invite up Kim Flom.
Well, I want to tell kind of an untold story of Vint. We knew that he had an impact on a lot of people's lives, but in the past few years, I would take Vint on tour through the Oakland Public Schools. I've worked as a librarian in their schools. And he would read to students in the first person the book called Heart and Soul by one of my favorite illustrators, Kadir Nielsen. And it's written in the first person narrative. So he'd start reading it like a grandfather to our young students. And then he'd gently just sit the book down. And then he would start telling about his life. He captured the students' and attention and hearts with the stories. He told them how he was drinking from a whites-only water fountain in a department store, which was so much cooler than the one for the colored. He shared his mom's really fear as she pulled him away. His neighborhood, Mark Frisbee mentioned a trip down to Mobile. Well, what he didn't say is that I scandalously invited myself. So was Mark and Vint and myself. Along with, for at least part of the tour, we had kind of an adopted son of ours, Marquise McGaw, who Vint also adopted, who's from Washington, D.C. So Vint took us down to your neighborhood and drove us around telling all about, where family members live, including the fact that the Klan had left their mark on certain yards over the years, and how individuals had families that just simply left in the middle of the night. He also talked about watching a young Hank Aaron play baseball with his older brothers and sisters in the field, kind of in the neighborhood. And then he did also talk about the impact of that Presbyterian minister, Calvin Houston, which was an intriguing name for me because our lineage, it's a Scottish name. And the fact that it's a Scottish name in North Carolina, I couldn't help but wonder if there was a connection with my own family. And in the 1700s and not an equal relationship. But Calvin Houston just saw something in Bent, and as we know from the bulletin, he went ahead and took him up to Stillman College and really made a difference. I just think of the impact of this one person had. The same minister was part of the desegregation of the schools in the 60s, and Ben said that he would sometimes go to those schools and actually pick up the black students who were attending for the first year the white school, just for their safety. And then he also shared, of course, as a college student, he would share with the students about my students. He would share about being part of SNCC and the civil rights movement and the reaction when King was shot, etc. Then I would ask him this question. I said, Vent, I'm sure some of my students are asking, how could you be friends with a white woman like myself? And then he would answer the question with his heart. And he told the students about love, while at the same time telling the truth about the past. So I just think of that legacy that he has made and will continue to make on the impact of a group of Oakland school students who had the privilege of hearing him once come in and talk about his background. Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to introduce my Uncle Larry, Reverend Larry.
I've been listening to all the things y'all say about my brother. Now let's tell the truth. Growing up in a house of 12, Ravenna was the meanest one of the bunch. He was a neighborhood terror. If you walk down our street and didn't pay him his nickel, you were gonna get beat up. We grew up that way. From my oldest brother down to the youngest, we were a close-knit family. And every year, Ravenna would come home and bring a friend who ended up living with us. He brought the Senator Michael Figures home. After his mother and father passed on, he lived with us. A couple other guys that were school teachers, they lived with us. In my father's house, that was a room called the bunkhouse, and it stayed full all the time. Now, there's so many girls, but a lot of guys lived in our home. None of them, the other kids brought that, all of them he brought. Well, he went to work for a company called Interface, which went around helping underprivileged neighborhoods. He brought all his co-workers home. And you wake up in the morning and walk through the house, you be stepping all over people, all over the floor. Ted was one of those people. Where he at? We had one bathroom in our house, and it was 12 children there. And every Thanksgiving, my mama would give everybody a dose of castor oil. Now, you youngsters don't know what that castor oil is. Trust me, you don't want to know. And one bathroom, we nearly had to fight for bathroom time. Vent was always a snazzy dresser. I always wanted to be like him. I always wanted to dress like him. As I grew up, I inherited his old clothes. You know, we passed down clothes when you got 12 children. And he would have all these expensive suits. And as he grew out of them for size, I grew into them. He went off to college at Stillman College and was going 4 years. And I went to a retreat with the Presbyterian church called Pine Tree. I came home. My dad and I were sitting out in the yard. Vint come home. He always liked to flex his muscles with the guys, push them around a little bit. My dad told me, said, leave Larry alone. He said, why? He said, because he ain't that little bit of kid no more. So he walked out there and he looked at me. He said, Dad told me to leave you alone. I stood up and looked down at him. I said, wise idea. He said, yeah. It probably is a wise idea. He was a musician. He couldn't sing, even though he tried. He was a good musician. He played saxophone. And he was like a womanizer. He loved women. But when he showed us a picture of Ruth, we knew then his days of chasing women was over. Thank you, Ruth. We had a lot of fights in the bedroom behind his girlfriends. My brother Anthony was bad about mustaching people's pictures. And we had one of the biggest fights in that because he mustached one of Vince's girlfriend's pictures and all hell broke loose. My mother and father were the type of people, they didn't care what side of the fence you grew up on. They didn't care how much money you had. They didn't care about the color of your skin. That didn't bother them. My mama wanted to make sure that when you were left out of our home, you were well fed, and you was going to be well fed. My daddy bought red beans and all the other vegetables they buy the sack. Y'all get he bought a sack, 25-pound sack, everything we bought, because he had a bunch of boys and girls to feed at all times. Now, if you dated one of my sisters, Vint and the rest of the boys, I was a nice one, they'd have a talk with you. They tell him in a minute, that girl ain't got no scars on her, she better not come up with none. But he was one of those kind of people, as we grew older, he told me one time, he said, you're the best athlete in the house. And I was. He said, you're one of the tallest in that family. And I was. He said, if I had your height and your skills, I would be somewhere where it makes a difference. He said, but you can't go anywhere that make a difference because the Lord put a curse on you. You're going to be a preacher. I said, you don't have to tell anybody that, you know. He said, I'm telling the truth. You were destined to be a preacher the night you were born. He said, I stood there and watched my mother give you back to the lady who delivered you, and that lady turned around and gave you to God. From that point on, your life was predestined. Everything you did from then on was always destined. I didn't grow up in a Baptist church. We were all Presbyterians. Y'all know what that means? You see, Little B said, Presbyterian people don't ask you what you want to do. They tell you what you're going to do. And then, believe it or not, they really expect for you to do it. And for some reason, you will do it and get it done. My Presbyterian mentor was Miss Nancy Thomas. She was a powerful person in the Presbyterian organization and also in the city of Mobile. And she told me, you got to go to the Presbyterian camp. I told her, no, I'm not going. I don't want to go there. She said, I'm paying your fees tomorrow. I said, I'm not going there. And the next day, everybody was sitting around the table. My dad and Ravenna was sitting at the end of the table. She walks in the house. Vince said, in there. He ain't out here, he in there. I said, what kind of person you to point me out and give me up like that? He said, I didn't want her to hit me. We loved him. We understood him more than most. Like I said, growing up as a child, Ravenna wasn't one of those kind of people you could say something bad to and walk away. He would hit you. Fighting hits you. He had a reputation for that. But he grew mellow and grew better as he got older. And they always tell you, what makes a man is the person that becomes his better half. Ruth came along and saved him and saved us. Did you hear me, Ruth? Ruth, pay attention to Larry talking. I want to thank you, Ruth, for what you did for my brother and our family. We wouldn't have made it if it hadn't been for you. Thank y'all very much.
All right, next up we have Hugh.
In 1973, Vent, Terry Damrow, and I met in Schwäbisch Hall, Germany, at a U.S. Army helicopter base. The three of us were working in civilian capacity for the Department of Defense, doing various things. And as Humphrey Bogart would have said, this was the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Last fall, when Terry and Vent and I got together for a Zoom call, Vent told us he was dying. So Terry and I arranged to come out and visit him and Ruth in January, which we did. We spent a wonderful weekend with Vent and Ruth, and after that weekend, I talked to Vent about once a week. We'd talk by phone. In a couple of weeks before he died, he was too weak to talk on the telephone. So we carried on that conversation through cards and letters. I would like to read to you a few passages from a couple of those letters. My good buddy Vent, like this card says, you have been a good friend to me even when we didn't see each other. Yet I know that you have always been a friend that I could count on in times of need, as well as in times of joy and celebration. I think the first time I realized how much I could count on you was when you flew out to the East Coast for my wedding. The wedding was a rather small, informal event. No bridesmaids, no groomsmen. Yet you stepped in as de facto best man and read the scripture, love is patient. You made sure my parents were cared for as Lori and I focused on other matters. And what sealed the deal, you danced with my mother-in-law. I was thinking again last week about some of the fun and adventures we had over the past 50 years or so. One of the more memorable events was your visit to Bakersfield. At that time, I was still pretty uninformed about racial prejudice and gave no thought to what you might experience as we bummed around town. I took you to one of my favorite night spots. I think it was in Oildale, without paying attention to the fact that it was a white working class dive. I know it was around Halloween and many wearing costumes. I didn't pay attention to what people were wearing. It was only afterward that you told me about the guy in the white robe and the white hood, and you're feeling the need to decline when a white woman asked you to dance. But we did have a good time. I occasionally show my psychology students a TED Talk by the psychologist Martin Seligman, where he describes writing a gratitude letter and delivering it to someone who has been very meaningful in one's life. When Seligman asks his audience to think of someone to receive this letter, I almost always think of you. So here's my gratitude letter describing 3 gifts that I have received from you and that I am most grateful for. The first gift is a gift of valuing everyone. Bumming around with you, I learned from your warm and welcoming behavior that everyone is worthy of consideration and respect. Everyone has value. You're always chatting up anyone we encountered, from a clerk at a store who was checking us out, to a waiter at a restaurant who was serving our food and drink, to the person in the seat next to us at a concert, a ball game, or some other type of public transportation. Everyone was a friend. The second gift was a gift of knowing, at least to the extent that a white man can know, what it is like to grow up black in America. For many years, you were simply a good friend who happened to be black. It was only in recent years, perhaps after the murder of George Floyd, that we began to talk about that important part of your life. You shared stories about the many indignities and difficulties you endured, such as not being allowed as a child to drink the cool water that came from the whites-only water fountain, or not being permitted to sign for an approved mortgage from your loan that your wife was ultimately able to sign without hassle. And I suspect there were many other stories that I haven't heard. The third gift was the gift of generosity. From the start of our friendship in the 1970s to today, I have been a regular beneficiary of your generosity. On the day I moved into the bachelor officers' quarters in Swabish Hall, you invited me into a dinner party and shared your friends, who immediately became my friends. When I moved to the East Coast, from the East Coast to California, you shared your apartment and again, your friends with me. And some 40 years later, when my daughter moved to California, you and Ruth hosted her until she could get settled and welcomed her into your family to the extent that she now refers to you as my West Coast dad. I can't thank you enough for the generosity you and Ruth have shown to me and my family over the years. And so I'd like you to know how much I appreciate the gifts of valuing others, knowing something of the black experience, and all the generosity that you have given me over more than 50 years of friendship. You have been a blessing on my life, and I wish you much love and affection.
All right, thank you, Hugh. Up next is Terry.
As Hugh just talked about, we met Vint in Germany, in Schwäbisch Hall, working there. Believe it or not, there are 5 people here today. 5 of us that met Vint and established our relationships with him in Germany. 5 of them. Hugh, myself, Carol Ellison, Nan Tibbetts, and Tony D'Antonio. And I think that speaks to the friendship and the love that Vint had for people. I mean, my goodness. Tony's in Washington, I'm in Austin, Texas, Hugh's in Virginia, and of course Nan is in San Diego, and Carol is in the Bay Area. But when we heard, as Hugh just said, when we heard, we would get together, Hugh, Vint, and I, for the last 15 years, we would rendezvous. We'd either meet at Vint's here, Hugh in Virginia, or we met in the United States, in the middle, in Texas. So, as Hugh just said, in December we decided to go visit him because we knew he was not going to last long. So Hugh and I wrote a letter, and I'm going to read this letter that I wrote to him. Let me step back. When we met, Vint and I called each other partners. And so every time we would call, it's like, hey, Pard, how you doing, Pard? And so that always stuck. We called each other Pards, as partners. And so in January, Hugh and I went to visit, and this is the letter that I was able to read to him. Dear Vint, my dear friend, my Pard, I'm writing this on Friday, January 3rd, 1 week before we visit you at your place on January 10th. It's hard to find the words. This weekend will be our last rendezvous for the 3 of us. Can't believe our friendship started 52 years ago in 1973 in the beautiful town of Schwäbisch Hall, Germany. It was a journey few people have. So many wonderful experiences and fond memories. We were truly living the dream. We traveled. We went to fests. We even went to the Oktoberfest once. We played tennis, as you saw in the pictures today in the church. He was playing tennis. We went skiing the Alps. It was good food, good drinks, and best of all, good people. God's plan for us in Germany didn't stop there. We all, Hugh and I and Vint, eventually returned home to America. We were able to visit, to stay in touch, and strengthen our friendship. Vince settled in the West Coast here in California. Hugh was on the East Coast in Virginia, and I was in the middle in Texas. We got married, raised our children, worked hard, and eventually retired. And life moved on. Our kids got married, they have children, and the cycle repeats itself. What a wonderful blessing for the three of us to be lifelong friends and to share our life journeys together, both the ups and the downs. You're an amazing person, Pard. I've always admired your love and service to others. It was evident the moment I met you in Schwabish Hall. You have followed God's commandment in John 13:34. Love one another as I have loved you. You've been a great example of love for others, for your wife Ruth, for your children, grandchildren, and most importantly, for your Lord and Savior. Today is one of those bittersweet moments. We get to be together again, but we also soon have to say goodbye and part after 52 years. No more rendezvous, at least not here on God's earthly kingdom. The last FaceTime call we had, you shared with us about your trip back to Alabama to visit with family and friends. One of your friends told you that we all eventually must leave this earth. You just happen to be leaving it sooner than others, but we'll all soon follow. I'm reminded of the German farewell, Auf Wiedersehen, until we meet again. I truly believe I'll meet you in heaven. That will be a marvelous day, living the ultimate dream with God and all the believers. Goodbye for now, my Pard. I'll miss you, and I love you. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Up next is my sister, Tiffany.
So I hadn't actually planned to speak today, so I don't have anything prepared. I'm just going to share some things that just come to mind. The story of me and my dad is a long story. It's a lot to unpack, so we're not going to do all of that, but I just want to share some good memories that we've had. My dad was the fun dad. Like he, always took me to Star Wars movies, even though I didn't like Star Wars. But I always had fun going just because that's what he liked to do, and so I enjoyed doing that with him. He snuck me off to my grandmother's to get my ears pierced when my mom wouldn't let me. I got this letter from Ruth, and so we had this, if you write me letters, I'll give you $10. So in the letter, I wrote just some random stuff, but in the PS, I was like, so at this point, you now owe me $30 because it was the first letter, and now it's this letter, and there was one that I think you forgot about. So don't forget to send me that. So I just, I never thought I would see this day if somebody had told me that, he wasn't going to be here. I wasn't prepared for that, even though we didn't talk often. There was a comfort and a security in knowing that he was there and that if I needed to, I could just call him. And so that cuts deep. Me and my mom were on opposite ends of the spectrum personality-wise, and so oftentimes she would tell me, you don't get along with your dad, you butt heads with him because you're so much like him. Or, you know what, you're so much like your dad, I can't stand you. And so being here and seeing how people are so fond of him and how well he was loved, I take that as a compliment to have someone think that I was that way, because that I can see how many people loved him, and that means he was a really special person. So I hope that I can fill those shoes in even the smallest capacity. So gonna miss him.
All right, up next is Nikki.
Mic check, y'all.
Yo, who is this man up on the stand, making mockery out of the fan? You know what's in your head, but chill, before this mic you make dead. I'm not afraid to speak, not afraid to think. not afraid to give this priest a wink. So who the cares? We're here for vent. We're here to repent. We're here to say goodbye to our heavenly sent. Y'all still don't get it, do you? He's not gone, he's in you. Ashes to ashes and dust to dust. But before this man left, his essence he thrust inside of you, inside of me. His transformative influence formed the souls of our being. For good or for bad, I'll let you decide. All you have to do is look.
Okay, thank you everybody that spoke. That's all that came up to me, but if somebody else wants to come up, please feel free.
I'd like to tell you all, I thank y'all for what y'all did for my brother. We're leaving now, and I want you all to know that I love everybody out here, and ain't nothing you can do about it. And to my brother, I'll say this, Ravenna, I'll see you in the morning.
All right, next up is Jessica.
Okay, I'll be quick. I'm used to following my brother Nikki. So my name's Jessica. I'm Vent's goddaughter. Technically, my brother is his godson, and I'm Jackie's, but Jackie tends to run me out of the house, so Vent and Ruth just metaphorically allowed me to be with them. So I'm here to represent the kids' table. For us kids, we've never known a life without Vent in it, so that's our distinct and unique way of knowing him. I've known him for over 40 years. I was in utero cocooned at his wedding and got to witness the most important relationship of love and commitment in my life with Vent and Ruthie together. You know, Vent was a storyteller, as you know, and the stories that we grew up with, starting with the delivery of one of the first daughters. And Vent would have, you know, I'm a midwife now, so Vent would be coaching Ruthie during pushing and would turn to her and say, "Hey, Ruthie, what am I? What am I?" And now as a midwife, after having watched many births, that's the only time I've ever seen anybody think that that was coach pushing, but he did amazing, and his beautiful daughter was born. Of the many things that Vent taught me in life, the power of laughter was probably the most important one. There was one time when I called Vent from a different country in a less than favorable moment, and I told Vent, "Hey, Vent, you know, I've had an affair." And Vent's response was, "Hold on, you've had an affair, and you didn't invite me to the wedding?" And then, of course, he would proceed to talk about all the necessary things, but he really taught me that laughter and lightness and love can exist within the deepest and darkest of places. I think for so many of us, Vent is a landmark. If we get lost, he helps us know which way to go. He'd be the first one to tell us that it doesn't matter what the job pays, it doesn't matter what used car you have to show up there, what your title is. And he'd be saying all of this while leaning out of his brand new Infiniti. I used to work in a field which was focused on violence and trauma, and they actually researched that trauma can change your DNA. It can pass down in biology from one generation to the next. And so I think it's true for love as well. I think that Vent has changed our DNA, and it will pass down to all the generations hereafter. So I know we all had, I wish I could rap like my brother, you know. But I know we had so many things we still wanted to do with him. Whether it's a trip to Alabama, a ceremony, or the pitter-patter of little feet that have yet to hit the ground. Vent was in the making of those dreams, and so I know that Vent will still be with us. So, to Vent, to my other father, the one that risked taking an adolescent clothes shopping just for her to know that she was loved, wherever you go after this, don't forget to remain within earshot in case we need you. Watch out for the Dahunda Shaisa, and may you finally learn how to moonwalk well. We all love you. Thanks.